Just a word to anyone who might be waiting in the stream right now. We're going to wait a few minutes until the top of the hour and get going with the stream on time then. We're just giving some people time to connect. I look forward to any questions you might have. Use the chat if you want to ask a question. I'll try to aggregate those after I go through a short presentation. So please go ahead and use the chat if you have some questions. I'm happy to answer anything we have. As I mentioned, we're going to get going in a few minutes here. We're just waiting for some more people to arrive. So just one moment and I will start the stream. All right. Thank you for joining me. I'm going to go ahead and get started now. My name is Scott Turnbull. I'm going to be doing a Gigabit Q&A for the City of Phoenix Cisco IoT Challenge today. You might have heard me say earlier or seen me type in the chat. If you have questions, this primarily is going to be a question and answer session after I do a sort of a brief introduction to Gigabit and sort of what that is, how Gigabit, advanced Gigabit networks are characterized, and then give some people some time to answer questions. So if you're viewing the page, you should have a chat. If you go to the live stream page, there'll be a chat in the upper right-hand corner. Go ahead and type out any questions you might have. I will be happy to answer those for you at the end of a short presentation that I'm going to do. That's about 4 or 5 slides, not very long. I'm just going to cover a little bit about what Gigabit is, what the background is, and what that advantage can can be for the Phoenix area. I know you've had the introduction to the Cisco IoT Challenge, and they presented you with some interesting challenges there. So I'm looking forward to whatever questions you might have that I might be able to answer for you. We'll get going here, like I said, in a second. I'll be able to answer sort of general gigabit questions. We'll kick over any specific local area questions to the community leader as well as and the technical leader. They might have some more specifics about where exactly something will go, but we'll have some insight into what can help you develop a strong gigabit application to make the strongest case for a submission to this program, at least on the gigabit side. We know that we're looking for transformative applications that help bring the city of Phoenix to sort of the next level in its smart city evolution. And we know that the local developers are really going to provide the strongest case and the strongest innovation to solving those challenges. So let's get going with the presentation. My name is Scott Turnbull. I am the National Technical Leader with US Ignite. We are a partner with the City of Phoenix and several other partners in the area as well to help develop them along the path of what's called being a smart gigabit community. And I'll get into what that is in a second, as well as what Gigabit is. I'm the National Technical Leader with that group, so I interact with our city technical professionals and the application developers. It's been a very rewarding time here at US Ignite, and I have really enjoyed interfacing with the city and developers like you all here to answer questions, so to get them some resources that might be helpful, connect them with national experts that might be helpful in developing applications, especially innovative application ideas. Probably the most challenging thing for everybody involved in the Smart Gigabit Communities program is moving things along the line of true innovation to get away from sort of thinking that we've been all accustomed to over the last 15 years, which is thinking of networks as unreliable and resources as constrained. And I'll get into gigabit in a second, but it really is about leveraging and building advanced networks in local areas that remove the constraints of both bandwidth, so we can move on to gigabit applications themselves, and also to remove the constraints of unreliability. Those are the two biggest things that we've gotten baked into our thinking. One, because of sort of challenges of previous Ethernet networks. That's the unreliability portion of it. And also sort of resource constraint comes in from lack of bandwidth on Ethernet networks, but as well as sort of thinking that are geared towards mobile networks, which tend to be slower and very bandwidth constrained. As I mentioned, if you're just joining us, there is a chat in the live stream here. I'm going to take questions. Primarily, this is going to be a question and answer. I'm going to go through a few initial slides that talk a little bit about what gigabit is and what characterizes advanced gigabit networks to get you thinking in that direction. But if you have questions, please go ahead and drop them in the chat at any time. I'll answer them when I get through a few short lines, but that'll give you some time to think of some questions on what might be most helpful information for you to develop an application that might address this Cisco IoT challenge. So I am happy to answer those questions. So as I mentioned, you can go ahead and you can tweet at me as well at Streamweaver on Twitter, or you can email me at scott.turnbull@us-ignite.org. I'm happy to take questions there as well. So the length of this today is really going to depend on how many questions we have, what the conversation is like. It could be short, it could be long. I'm here for you, so that's fine with me, and I hope you get something out of it. So feel free to ask those questions at any time in the local chat. So first, tell you a little bit about the US Ignite family and which Phoenix is a part of, and sort of what access you get to the greater US Ignite Smart Gigabit Communities cadre of cities. I think we're growing, and we're just about to announce 2 more cities. So I think that puts us somewhere around 20 or 21 cities nationally, and now internationally with the entry of Adelaide, Australia, down in Australia. They've been a tremendous partner with us, and it's really broadened the set of problems that cities are looking looking to resolve, and the sort of the innovation groups that are looking to solve them. I think initially people thought when we got all these cities involved in creating advanced gigabit applications that we would have lots of overlaps, people solving the same problem. And while it's true that often they attempt to solve a similar problem, most of the cities don't have a lot of overlap. They're really solving it in either different ways or solving different aspects of the problems. So being a part of the Smart Gigabit Communities program, what that does is it opens up access to things like domain professionals that might be at universities and other areas. It might open up the access to other city test beds, sharing applications between SG cities is a component of the Smart Gigabit Communities initiative. And that community of IT professionals who are thinking along the lines of advanced gigabit networks and next generation applications, that opens up a whole world of possibilities for people involved. So that's the cadre of cities we're working with right now, and we're very, very proud that Phoenix is a part of that group of cities. Again, go ahead and drop questions in the chat if you have them. But what the advantage of being a Smart Gigabit community is really is that the community itself forms what they call a steering group that is helping to sort of join partners in your region. You saw the slide before that Cisco and Cox are very strong partners, as well as the city of Phoenix and Arizona State University, very strong partners in the Smart Gigabit Communities program there. They help tie together local internet providers, innovation hubs, other people might be able to fund applications, connect to things like National Science Foundation. They sort of rally all of those resources around a center point towards a common vision, which is these advanced gigabit networks that allow the deployment and running of applications that could not operate on current networks and be limited by what they could provide, to really open up new avenues of economies and new opportunities for developers who think they can provide innovative solutions, but are limited by either the latency or the bandwidth of current networks or the architecture. And we'll get to that a little bit in a minute. There's a community leader, Dominic Papa, who I hope you've got a chance to meet. He's a very dynamic individual, and I think he's probably on this live stream right now. So hi, Dom. There's a local technical leader in the Phoenix area who I work directly with, Troy Anderson. He's a very bright guy, very plugged into the innovative community there. So I think you'll find him very insightful and very helpful to developing a local gigabit development community. Also, we reach out to local development groups. So those leaders and the steering group are pulling together local developers to help join that community into sort of not a cohesive vision, but to tap the innovation hubs that are happening around the city so they're not so siloed, to connect them with resources to get them moving to something that will really benefit and transform Phoenix in some dramatic way. And we're committed to sort of developing an environment that fosters the innovation, fosters innovation and the delivery of gigabit applications that might have limited people from developing these applications in the past. So right now, Phoenix is in the process of trying to identify a local big gigabit exchange point for traffic. One of the concepts there is that all local traffic should stay local, and that'll provide fast response for edge compute clusters in the region. But that'll make sure that'll remove sort of the network unreliability and the difference you might get between different providers. That providers with local traffic should always be communicating locally, and you shouldn't have to hop out to places like Utah or LA to exchange internet traffic between providers. So it should always stay local. Also, we're identifying right now an edge compute host that can be made available to SGC application developers. They can deploy that too as an incubation space. It should be provided free, as long as it'll meet the criteria what that host will run. And that will help build the innovation community by having a go-to host for them to deploy and try out these applications on, as well as giving them a network backbone to experiment with applications and deploy applications to that can deliver services at gigabit speeds and with near real-time latency. There's also a component of Smart Gigabit Community Connects. So each one of these SGC communities that I showed you on the previous slide, they have an Internet 2 backbone connection between those cities. So if you need to leverage big data hubs, if you need to leverage assets at what they call Genie cluster of a Genie compute cluster anywhere in the nation, or you need to be able to access the other experts or other city test beds in the SGC community. That's a reliable and fast pathway between SGC cities in the Smart Gigabit Communities network. And then I mentioned local traffic routing. So we can make these cross connects. We can put in the switches. We can build the fiber between these routers locally. But we need to work work with the local ISPs and gigabit providers to be able to configure those routers to send traffic back and forth. So I really want to focus there. That bullet's really to address that. There is a tremendous amount of goodwill and tremendous amount of work and innovation being done by IT professionals in the Phoenix area, and they really are focused on bringing Phoenix forward to be a next generation gigabit community and a sort of a destination for entrepreneurs and innovators nationally who might be looking to locate to some place that's very friendly towards the innovation environment. Each gigabit city is looking to identify at least 2 gigabit applications per year for a 3-year period. We're looking for true gigabit applications. So really we want to push that edge of applications that could not run on modern networks, that would need a gigabit network to reliably deliver services or function for the end users, whoever that may be. So that it really targets something that couldn't run in just any city and features the advantage that Phoenix is building. And we want to be able to share those with other gigabit communities. And that's a flexible term. What I always let people get concerned about that statement, but that basically means that we have the right to demonstrate that for other SGC communities in the Smart Gigabit Communities cohort of cities, and that we can open up other we can expand the sort of the user base possible for people who want to develop these innovative applications right away and provide them access to a customer base that might provide them with an immediate advantage over other developers. All right, so gigabit applications itself. It's one of the things that's difficult for people to wrap their head around. Again, we're sort of used to thinking along the avenue of resource constraints and unreliable networks, but this really is shifting away from those assumptions and into true gigabit applications, and those compose big thinking. So I meant to type flood, not food, by the way. So floods of data. So any constant stream of data that might be coming at high volume out of IoT devices or detection devices. Those include camera arrays or environmental sensor arrays. They can generate lots of data in small time. So having networks that can handle that large bandwidth of traffic. Big data is another one as well. There's a lot of big data hubs, and we need to switch those out. So moving that data down the Ethernet is not cheap these days and not easy. But on a gigabit network, we can cache local data and get it back and forth to compute clusters as needed. That might include things like 4K video. Live streaming of 4K video is a big challenge for current Ethernet networks. Of course, you can do it over things like Netflix, but that's a high latency stream. We're talking about real-time streams that can really help the community interact with different parts of it in a way that as if they were present. And that can open up avenues for things like telemedicine, computer vision algorithms. I know we've talked about waste management here. I think there's some possibility there for sensor detection and things that stream data back to some analytical point. 4K video stream is very useful if you were targeting a computer vision algorithm that needed to detect maybe object recognition to differentiate recyclable from non-recyclable waste. That might be something that applies. Multispectral imagery is another, so that might be standard HD video, but it has multiple layers that you can switch between, so it carries a lot of data in a single pixel that might carry data for infrared or regular visible light or anything in between, and that might provide a high level of analytical capability based on that imagery. And anything that generates big data is really the big component of that. The other component of this, and that's the most well understood, by the way. Big is the most well understood part when we mention gigabit networks, but we use the term advanced gigabit networks because it has these other two components, which are increasingly more difficult to visualize for people. The second component is fast. So we're talking about real-time interaction, sub 10 millisecond, something that can happen that can enable maybe self-driving cars or transportation grid or internet to vehicle infrastructure, something that can happen happen as if you were standing in the room with someone, or maybe even give you something that's fast enough to get the point of decision feedback. So let's say an image, HD image was shot across the network that needed to be processed and get a response to the user in time for them to either make a recycling decision, to make a purchase decision, for a truck to make a pickup decision. Those are all game in terms of that fast and real time. That's generally accomplished. Big is obviously accomplished by just big fiber in the area that pushes a lot of data down the pipe. Fast is accomplished by having these local compute clusters that enable short routes of data between compute clusters and the user, so that really brings out, even at speed of light, going across country to an Amazon data center, for instance, that can bring in some latency that can be problematic, as well as a number of hops and a number of other things that happen when you get these long routes on networks. So providing short routes for locally routed traffic to edge compute clusters, you can really bring down the latency of a network to just unthinkable levels that we don't really expect out of most networks these days. And the last part that's very difficult for people to imagine is secure. So while it may not be gigabit, we're talking about the advanced portion of this, something that might leverage layer 2 networking or some special software-defined networking or slice networks to provide an enhanced security around devices that might be deployed to these networks. And that might sound trivial as it relates to waste management, but I can assure you it's not. A big vulnerability of common networks is we need to, by several orders of magnitude, scale up the number of devices on current networks. With the explosion of IoT devices that are happening in the world right now, just having those devices in the world, it doesn't matter what they are or where they are, just having them exposed to the regular internet is a huge vulnerability for a city. So we're looking very hard at software-defined networking or creating network slices or other isolated network techniques that let IoT devices communicate with each other or communicate back to a compute cluster, but don't open them up to the vulnerabilities of just plugging a device with an IP address visible to the regular internet. So we're looking to provide really large data and large traffic moving down the network and very fast response time. And we're also looking to provide that in a way that's very secure and doesn't open up that community to more vulnerability and more hacking attempts that you would have to see. All right, so I'm just going to jump into questions now. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to take them at this time. If we don't have them, we can always email them to me later at scott.turnbull at us-ignite.org, or you can tweet them to me. I'm happy to answer them at that later date. I know we only have a few users in the stream, so go ahead and let me know if you have a question, and I'll be happy to answer it. Just type it in the chat. While you're doing that, I'm very happy to see Phoenix come on board. It's been a really tremendous experience getting to know Phoenix. Also, you'll see in the slide, by the way, there's several people you can reach out to for additional questions. So I should have jumped to that right away. We have the lead business systems analyst for the solid waste division, City of Phoenix. They're ready to answer your questions, especially around sort of the meat of the challenge itself. I know it's a waste management challenge. They're looking for a couple clear outcomes that improve the quality of service for waste management and reduce waste in it. So they'll have some great feedback for you to make sure it's targeting the aspects of that environment that are most effective for the city. Mike. I'm going to mess these names up. I'm sorry. Mike over at Cisco is able to provide some answers around sort of networking options that Cisco is providing for this connectivity. They provide ultra-fast networks and switches that are able to get route traffic intelligently to places where your compute cluster might go. What is the competition about? I see one of the questions is, what are the competitions about? I look on the challenge website. I'm not here to, I wasn't going to really rehash the challenge with everybody, but please go ahead and do that. It's around waste management and the reduction of waste, and reduction of waste in the service as it's provided by the city. And you can contact Dominic Papa a little bit about that to get specifics of the challenge itself. Dominic Papa, again, the Executive Director, Institute for Digital Progress. He's the community leader for the Phoenix area. I'm the National Technical Leader for US Ignite. I'm happy to take any of your questions. Most appropriately, I can answer your questions when it comes to sort of gigabit and what qualifies as gigabit. How do we see trends in gigabit and how those generally develop over time? And I think Dominic can help you with sort of any individual questions about the city of Phoenix. Mike can help you with questions about the network backbone and the help Cisco is providing here. And Lisa can help provide questions about the direct challenge for the reduction of waste for the city of Phoenix waste department. Oh, we can just give it another minute. If you have any more questions, just pop them in the chat. All right, that's all I'm going to do today then. I appreciate your time, and I hope you learned a little bit about gigabit development and gigabit technologies. You can talk to Dominic a little bit about the judging criteria for the challenge. They presented that, I think, last month. So the webpage that's linked on this site, that's going to give you some more information about the challenge itself. There's also a link to these slides that I just put up if you want to get any of that information. Those links are also down in the show notes that you'll find on the webpage. They're down below us. I have a question here. What if my application wouldn't need Gigabit in its current version, but it will very soon? Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe you can provide me with a little bit more details in the chat as I give you sort of a basic answer. I mean, I think that's reasonable. If you start out and build towards Gigabit, that is that's not infrequent. So let's say I don't know what your solution might be, but let's say someone were to start with a computer vision algorithm, and they weren't feeding it 4K video right away. They were starting with HD, and they knew by the production time they wanted to get to a higher definition video. Something like that certainly is fine. It depends on sort of how you would eventually get to Gigabit. I think the strongest submission to the challenge is going to be an application that's innovative, provides a transformative benefit to the city, but also there's going to be a component in the judging about how well it leverages the gigabit. So if it's not truly gigabit, I think that's going to affect the sort of how we compare applications one to another. But just keep it in mind that the better you can use the gigabit, the better I think it will be received by the judging panel. And go ahead, Aman, answer questions. So Anam, I hope I'm getting your name right, by the way. The question is, can they get access to the TomTom API the city of Phoenix is using? I believe you can. The one to help you facilitate that will be Dominic. He'll probably throw out a question to Lisa, but yes, you should be able to access that API. They might need to go through whatever they need to go through at the city to help get you an account that access that API. But providing that level of access is sort of what we're doing. So go ahead and please CC me on any email, but also send it out to Dominic to get that access to that API. Should be consumable for you. You might want to give a short summary on what the use case for that is and how you'll secure calls to it. Likely they'll require some sort of API key with an SSH connection, but yeah, you should be able to get that. Okay, because next question is there. For the competition, they're exploring multiple options to utilize gigabit network. That's great. Something I should have said earlier, by the way, and I think you might have another question, so please keep typing. I can read it when it comes up. I put up those three criteria of big, fast, and secure for advanced gigabit networks. It really only needs to be one of them. It doesn't need to be all three. We know that advanced gigabit networks have one of those three characteristics. It can have all three if you have a need for that, but we're really looking for something that strongly uses at least one of those. They want to, they're exploring multiple gigabit network. Most of the data, they want to reach out to see if there's some ideas for the best way to leverage the network. Yeah, please go ahead and email me. If you're using an API, so I've seen some people in other instances, you might be typing a little bit more. I've seen some people in other instances typing a bit in APIs, leveraging APIs for sort of gigabit calls. In most cases, the advantage that they find in the API is the ability to provide real-time responsiveness. So as you know, APIs are generally, not always, but generally intended to provide small data responses. And the challenge there is sort of real-time. So can they develop a response from an API that gives people, short enough response that they can literally make a choice while standing in front of a point of purchase, like at a kiosk, or if a car or truck is driving by a house, could that person get notification so within time to know if they could take the barrels out, or the city knows the truck is asking as it's coming down the street to the individual, hey, your cans aren't out. Are you making sure you're coming? Or give them sort of an alert so they know to get the cans out in time. But it doesn't. It's not like an hour before. It's maybe 15 minutes or 10 minutes before. So it lets them walk out to the curb. Anything that gives you that short enough time frame for response, that tends to be where APIs are have the largest advantage on the gigabit network. Do you have any specific scenarios that you're looking to use it with? Please let me know. I'm happy to take that question if you have it. Okay. So we're going just a half hour now. I think that's if that's all the questions you have, I'm happy to wrap it up. Go ahead and email me if you have any additional questions. I am happy to answer them. We can go ahead and get those, and sometimes take a little bit of time to think about it. So take some time, sit back, think about the solutions you might want to get. I'm happy to hop on a call. We can arrange one with Troy as well as Dominic, and maybe there might be a good follow-up session again in a week or so. We can look at if Dominic can set a session like that up. But I would be happy to do that if people think it would be useful. So there's a question of, is there an expectation that our solution be packaged in Docker? Yeah, Phil, that's a great question. There isn't. So you might be referring to some of the material on the US Ignite website about using Docker as a container for services that are deployed. It's an encouragement, but not a requirement. And it's not a requirement for the Cisco Gigabit Challenge. All we're trying to do there is that's really about sharing the application between cities in the SGC cohort with the SGC cohorts. We're trying to create some reasonable distributable strategy with those applications. So really all we're asking is you have some distribution strategy with the application, and it's a little bit better than maybe just compile from source. That could be anything. That could be a binary distributable. It can be maybe a download with an Ansible provisioning script. Docker containers, I recommend them, and I think they can work good, but there's no requirement that you work with them. Some people like Kubernetes instead, and there's a few other emerging frameworks. So we encourage the use of Docker, but it is by no means a requirement. And there's no any other requirement will be listed on the challenge website. Again, that URL is provided. I think it's right. It should be right this way, right? Right there on the slide. Just click that URL. It'll take you to the Cisco IoT challenge for Phoenix. It gives you some more details about the specific challenge and the problem they're looking to fix. That's really all I have to add right now. Just think more broadly about gigabit networks and how that can go. I think with what advantage that can provide. That's we encourage that. If you come up with a great solution that takes no bandwidth at all, I don't think anyone's going to turn you away. Talk to Dominic about that. But we're here to encourage gigabit application development. But no one's going to frown at a great solution that doesn't use gigabit. It may not just be placed in the SGC portfolio, but we love to hook up innovative solutions to cities that can really use them. So. All right, thank you very much for joining me today. I appreciate it. Again, you can find more information at the two URLs that I linked at both the slide deck here and the challenge information. You can reach out to anybody else on this slide for additional questions, especially if you think of them later. Just please go ahead. We're happy to answer those questions. Thank you very much for joining me today. I hope to talk to you in the future, and I'm looking forward to the solutions you all provide. So thank you very much.